Walter Elias Disney was born December 5th, 1901, and passed away December 15th of 1966. He was an American animator, film producer, voice actor, and entrepreneur. A pioneer of the American animation industry, he introduced several developments in the production of cartoons. As a film producer, he holds the record for the most Academy Awards won, that's 22, and nominations, which is 59, by an individual. He was presented with 2 Golden Globe Special Achievement Awards and an Emmy Award, among other honors. Several of his films are included in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress and have also been named as some of the greatest films ever by the American Film Institute. Disney was born on December 5th of 1901 at 1249 Tripp Avenue in Chicago, Hermosa neighborhood. He was the 4th son of Elias Disney, born in the province of Canada to Irish parents, and Flora, an American of German and English descent. Aside from Walt, Elias and Flora's son were Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, and the couple had a 5th child, Ruth, in December 1903. In 1906, when Disney was 4, the family moved to a farm in Marceline, Missouri, where his uncle Robert had just purchased land. In Marceline, Disney developed his interest in drawing when he was paid to draw the horse of a retired neighborhood doctor. Elias was a subscriber to the Appeal to Reason newspaper, and Disney practiced drawing by copying the front-page cartoons of Ryan Walker. He also began to develop an ability to work with watercolors and crayons. He lived near the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railway line and became enamored with trains. He and his younger sister Ruth started school at the same time at the Park School in Marceline. In late 1909, the Disney family were active members of the Congregational Church. Disney later described his childhood in Marceline as one of the happiest and most formative periods of his life and drew inspiration from the town for several of his future projects. In 1911, Disney moved to Kansas City, Missouri. There, Disney attended Benton Grammar School, where he met fellow student Walter Pfeiffer, who came from a family of theater fans and introduced him to the world of vaudeville and motion pictures. Before long, Disney was spending more time at the Pfeiffer's house than at home. Elias had purchased a newspaper delivery route for the Kansas City Star and Kansas City Times. Disney and his brother Roy woke up at 4:30 every morning to deliver the Times before school and repeated the round for the Evening Star after school. The schedule was exhausting, and Disney often received poor grades after falling asleep in class, but he continued his paper route for more than 6 years. He attended Saturday courses at the Kansas City Art Institute and also took a correspondence course in cartooning. In 1917, Elias bought stock in a Chicago jelly producer, the Oswald Company, and moved back to Chicago with his family. Disney enrolled at the McKinley High School and became the cartoonist of the school newspaper, drawing patriotic pictures about World War I. He also took night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. In mid-1918, he attempted to join the United States Army to fight the Germans, but he was rejected as too young. After forging the date of birth on his birth certificate, he joined the Red Cross in September of 1918 as an ambulance driver. He was shipped to France, but arrived in November after the armistice. He drew cartoons on the side of his ambulance for decoration and had some of his work published in the Army newspaper, Stars and Stripes. He returned to Kansas City in October of 1919, where he worked as an apprentice artist at the Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Studio, where he drew commercial illustrations for advertising, theater programs, and catalogs, and befriended fellow artist Ub Lurks. In January of 1920, as Pesman Rubin's revenue declined after Christmas, Disney aged 18, and LaWorks were laid off. They started their own business, the short-lived LaWorks Disney Commercial Artists. Failing to attract many customers, Disney and LaWorks agreed that Disney should leave temporarily to earn money at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, run by A.V. Cugger. The following month, LaWorks was not able to run their business alone, also joined. The company produced commercials using the cutout animation technique. Disney became interested in animation, although he preferred drawn cartoons such as Mutt and Jeff and Matt Fleischer's Out of the Inkwell. With the assistance of a borrowed book on animation and a camera, he began experimenting starting at home. He came to the conclusion that cell animation was more promising than the cutout method. Unable to persuade Coger to try to sell animation at the company, Disney opened a new business with co-worker from the film ad company Fred Harmon. Their main client was the local Newman Theater, and the short cartoons they produced were sold as Newman's Laughograms. Disney studied Paul Terry's Aesop's Fables as a model, and the first 6 Laughograms were modernized fairy tales. In May of 1921, the success of the Laughograms led to establishment of Laughogram Studio, for which he hired more animators, including Fred Harmon's brother, Hugh, Rudolph Lezing, and LeWorks. The Laughogram cartoons did not provide enough income to keep the company solvent, so Disney started production of Alice's Wonderland, based on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which combined live action with animation. He cast Virginia Davis in the title role. The result, a 12.5-minute one-reel film, was completed too late to save Laughogram Studio, which went into bankruptcy in 1923. Disney moved to Hollywood on July of 1923 at 21 years old. Although New York was the center of the cartoon industry, he was attracted to Los Angeles because his brother Roy was convalescing from tuberculosis there, and he hoped to become a live-action film director. Disney's efforts to sell Alice's Wonderland were in vain until he heard from New York film distributor Margaret J. Winkler. She was losing the rights to both the Out of Inkwell and Felix the Cat cartoons and needed a new series. In October, they signed a contract for 6 Alice comedies with an option for 2 further series of 6 episodes each. Disney and his brother Roy formed the Disney Brothers Studio, which later became the Walt Disney Company, to produce the films. They persuaded Davis and her family to relocate to Hollywood to continue production. With Davis on contract at $100 a month, in July of 1924, Disney also hired LeWorks, persuading him to relocate to Hollywood from Kansas City. In 1926, the first official Walt Disney Studio was established at 2725 Hyperion Avenue. The building was demolished in 1940. By 1926, Winkler's role in the distribution of the Alice series had been handed over to her husband, the film producer Charles Mintz, although the relationship between him and Disney was sometimes strained. The series ran until July of 1927, by which time Disney had begun to tire of it and wanted to move away from the mixed format to all animation. After Mintz requested new material to distribute through Universal Pictures, Disney and LeWorks created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, a character Disney wanted to be peppy, alert, saucy, and venturesome, keeping him also neat and trim. In February of 1928, Disney hoped to negotiate a larger fee for producing the Oswald series, but found Mintz wanting to reduce the payments. Mintz had also persuaded many of the artists involved to work directly for him, including Harmon, Lezing, Carmen Maxwell, and Fritz Freleng. Disney also found out that Universal owned the intellectual property rights to Oswald. Mintz threatened to start his own studio and produce the series himself if Disney refused to accept the reductions. Disney declined Mintz's ultimatum and lost most of his animation staff except LeWorks, who chose to remain with him. To replace Oswald, Disney and LeWorks developed Mickey Mouse, possibly inspired by a pet mouse that Disney had adopted while working in his Laughogram studio, although the origins of the character are unclear. Disney's original choice of name was Mortimer Mouse, but his wife Lillian thought it too pompous and suggested Mickey instead. LeWorks revised Disney's provisional sketches to make the character easier to animate. Disney, who had begun to distance himself from the animation process, provided Mickey's voice until 1947. In the words of one Disney employee, Ub designed Mickey's physical appearance, but Walt gave him his soul. Mickey Mouse first appeared in May of 1928 as a single test screening of the short Plain Crazy, but it and the second feature, The Gallopin' Gaucho, failed to find a distributor. Following the 1927 sensation The Jazz Singer, Disney used synchronized sound on the third short, Steamboat Willie, to create the first post-produced sound cartoon. After the animation was complete, Disney signed a contract with the former executive Universal Pictures, Pat Powers, to use the Powers Cinephone recording system. Cinephone became the new distributor for Disney's early sound cartoons, which soon became popular. To improve the quality of the music, Disney hired the professional composer and arranger Carl Stalling, on whose suggestion the Silly Symphony series was developed, providing stories through the use of music. The first in the series, The Skeleton Dance, from 1929, was drawn and animated entirely by LeWorks. Also hired at this time were several artists, both local and from New York. Both the Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphony series was successful, but Disney and his brother felt they were not receiving their rightful share of profits from Powers. In 1930, Disney tried tried to trim costs from the process by urging the works to abandon the practice of drawing every frame individually in favor of more efficient technique of drawing key poses and letting assistants sketch the in-between poses. Disney asked Powers for an increase in payments for the cartoons. Powers refused and signed LaWorks to work for him. Stalling resigned shortly afterwards, thinking that without LaWorks, the Disney studio would close. Disney had a nervous breakdown in October of 1931, which he blamed on the machinations of Powers and his own overwork, so he and Lillian took an extended holiday to Cuba and a cruise to Panama to recover. With the loss of Powers as distributor, Disney Studios signed a contract with Columbia Pictures to distribute the Mickey Mouse cartoons, which became increasingly popular, including internationally. Disney and his crew also introduced new cartoon stars like Pluto in 1930, Goofy in 1932, and Donald Duck in 1934. Always keen to embrace new technology and encouraged by his new contract with United Artists, Disney filmed Flowers and Trees in full color, 3-strip Technicolor. He was also able to negotiate a deal giving him the sole right to use the 3-strip process until August 31st of 1935. All subsequent Silly Symphony cartoons were in color. Flowers and Trees was popular with audiences and won the inaugural Academy Award for Best Short Subject Cartoon at the 1932 ceremony. Disney had been nominated for another film in that category, Mickey's Orphans, and received an honorary award for the creation of Mickey Mouse. In 1933, Disney produced The Three Little Pigs, a film described by the media historian Adrian Danks as the most successful short animation of all time. The film won Disney another Academy Award in the subject of cartoon category. The film's success led to a further increase in the studio's staff, which numbered nearly 200 by the end of the year. Disney realized the importance of telling emotionally gripping stories that would interest the audience, and he invested in a story department separate from animators, with storyboard artists who would detail the plots of Disney's films. By 1934, Disney had become dissatisfied with producing cartoon shorts and believed a feature-length cartoon would be more profitable. The studio began the 4-year production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, based on the fairy tale. When news leaked out about the project, many in the film industry predicted it would bankrupt the company. Industry insiders named it Disney's Folly. The film, which was the first animated feature made in full color and sound, cost $1.5 million to produce, 3 times over budget. To ensure the animation was as realistic as possible, Disney sent his animators on courses at the Chouinard Art Institute. He brought animals into the studio and hired actors so that the animators could study realistic movement. To portray the changing perspective of the background as a camera moved through a scene, Disney's animators developed a multi-plane camera which allowed drawings on pieces of glass to be set at various distances from the camera, creating an illusion of depth. The glass could be moved to create the impression of a camera passing through the scene. The first work created on the camera, a silly symphony called The Old Mill from 1937, won the Academy Award for Animated Short Film because of its impressive visual power. Although Snow White had been largely finished by the time the multi-plane camera had been completed, Disney ordered some scenes to be redrawn to use the new effects. Snow White premiered in December of 1937 to high praise from critics and audiences. The film became the most successful motion picture of 1938, and by May of 1939, its total gross of $6.5 million made it the most successful sound film made to that date. Disney won another honorary Academy Award, which consisted of 1 full-sized and 7 miniature Oscar statuettes. The success of the Snow White heralded one of the most productive eras for the studio. The Walt Disney Family Museum calls the following years the golden age of animation. With work on Snow White finished, the studio began producing Pinocchio in early 1938 and Fantasia in November of the same year. Both films were released in 1940 and neither performed well at the box office, partly because revenues from Europe had dropped following the start of World War II in 1939. The studio incurred a loss of both pictures and was deeply in debt by the end of February of 1941. In response to the financial crisis, Disney and his brother Roy started the company's first public stock offering in 1940 and implemented heavy salary cuts. The latter measure, in Disney's sometimes high-handed and insensitive manner of dealing with staff, led to a 1941 animator strike which lasted 5 weeks. While a federal mediator from the National Labor Relations Board negotiated with the two sides, Disney accepted an offer from the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs to make a goodwill trip to South America, ensuring he was absent during a resolution he knew would be unfavorable to the studio. Due to the strike and the financial state of the company, several animators left the studio, and Disney's relationship with other members members of the staff was permanently strained as a result. The strike temporarily interrupted the studio's next production, Dumbo, which Disney produced in a simple and inexpensive manner. The film received a positive reaction from audiences and critics alike. Shortly after the release of Dumbo in October of 1941, the U.S. entered World War II. Disney formed the Walt Disney Training Films Unit within the company to produce instruction films for the military, such as for methods of flush riveting and aircraft production methods. Disney also met with Henry Morgenthau Jr., the Secretary of the Treasury, and agreed to produce short Donald Duck cartoons to promote war bonds. Disney also produced several propaganda productions, including shorts such as Der Führer's Face, which won an Academy Award, and the 1943 feature film Victory Through Air Power. The military films generated only enough revenue to cover costs, and the feature film Bambi, which had been in production since 1937, underperformed on its release in August of 1942 and lost $200,000 at the box office. On top of the low earnings from Pinocchio and Fantasia, the company had debts of $4 million with the Bank of America in 1944. At a meeting with Bank of America executives to discuss the future of the company, the bank's chairman and founder told his executives, "I've been watching the Disney's pictures quite closely because I knew we were lending them money far above the financial risk. They're good this year, they're good next year, and they're good the next year after. You have to relax and give them time to market their product." Disney's production of short films decreased in the late 1940s, coinciding with increasing competition in the animation market from Warner Brothers and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Roy Disney, for financial reasons, suggested more combined animation and live-action productions. In 1948, Disney initiated a series of popular live-action nature films titled True Life Adventures, with Seal Island the first. The film won the Academy Award in the Best Short Subject, 2 Reel category. In early 1950, Disney produced Cinderella, his studio's first animated feature in 8 years. It was popular with critics and theater audiences. Costing $2.2 million to produce, it earned nearly $8 million in its first year. Disney was less involved than he had been with previous pictures because of his involvement in his first entirely live-action feature, Treasure Island, which was shot in Britain, as was the story of Robin Hood and his merry men. Other all-live-action features followed, many of which had patriotic themes. He continued to produce full-length animated features too, including Alice in Wonderland in 1951 and Peter Pan in 1953. From the early to mid-1950s, Disney began to devote less attention to the animation department, entrusting most of its operations to his key animators, the 9 old men, although he was always present at story meetings. Instead, he started concentrating on other ventures. Around the same time, Disney established his own film distribution division, Buena Vista, replacing his most recent distributor, RKO Pictures. For several years, Disney had been considering building a theme park. When he visited Griffith Park in Los Angeles with his daughters, he wanted to be in a clean, unspoiled park where both children and their parents could have fun. He visited the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, Denmark, and was heavily influenced by the cleanliness and layout of the park. In March of 1952, he received zoning permission to build a theme park in Burbank near the Disney Studios. The site proved too small, and a larger plot in Anaheim, 35 miles south of the studio, was purchased. To distance the project from the studio, which might attract the criticism of shareholders, Disney formed WED Enterprises, now Walt Disney Imagineering, and used his own money to fund a group of designers and animators to work on the plans. Those involved became known as Imagineers. After obtaining bank funding, he invited other stockholders, American Broadcasting Paramount Theaters, part of the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, and Western Printing and Lithographing Company. In mid-1954, Disney sent his Imagineers to every amusement park in the U.S. to analyze what worked and what pitfalls or problems there were in the various locations, and incorporated their findings into his design. Construction work started in July of 1954, and Disneyland opened in July of 1955. The open ceremony was broadcast on ABC, which reached 70 million viewers. The park was designed as a series of themed lands linked by the central Main Street USA, a replica of the Main Street in his hometown of Marceline. The connected theme areas were Adventureland, Frontierland, Disneyland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland. The park also contained the narrow-gauge Disneyland Railroad that linked the lands. Around the outside of the park was a high berm to separate the park from the outside world. An editorial in the New York Times considered that Disney had tastefully combined some of the pleasant things of yesterday with fantasy and dreams of tomorrow. Although there were early minor problems with the park, it was a success, and after a month's operation, Disneyland was receiving over 20,000 visitors a day. By the end of its first year, it attracted 3.6 million guests. The money from ABC was contingent on Disney television programs. The studio had been involved in a successful television special on Christmas Day in 1950 about the making of Alice in Wonderland. Roy believed the program added millions to the box office takings. In a March 1951 letter to shareholders, he wrote that television can be the most powerful selling aid for us, as well as a source of revenue. It will probably be on this premise that we enter television when we do. In 1954, after the Disneyland funding had been agreed, ABC broadcast Walt Disney's Disneyland, an anthology consisting of animated cartoons, live-action features, and other material from the studio's library. The show was successful in terms of ratings and profits, earning an audience share of over 50%. In April of 1955, Newsweek called the series an American institution. ABC was pleased with the ratings, leading to Disney's first daily television program, The Mickey Mouse Club, a variety show catering specifically to children. The program was accompanied by merchandising through various companies. Western Printing, for example, had been producing coloring books and comics for over 20 years and produced several items connected to the show. One of the segments of Disneyland consisted of 5-part miniseries, Davy Crockett, which according to Disney biographer Neil Gabler, became an overnight sensation. The show's theme song, The Ballad of David Crockett, became internationally popular and 10 million records were sold. As a result, Disney formed his own record production and distribution entity, Disneyland Records. As well as the construction of Disneyland, Disney worked on other projects away from the studio. He was a consultant to the 1959 American International Exhibition in Moscow. Disney Studios contributed was American the Beautiful, a 19-minute film in the 360-degree Circorama Theater that was one of the most popular attractions. The following year, he acted as the chairman of the pageantry committee for the 1960 Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley, California, where he designed the opening, closing, and medal ceremonies. He was one of 12 investors in the Celebrity Sports Center, which opened in 1960 in Glendale, Colorado. He and Roy bought out the others in 1962, making the Disney Company the sole owner. Despite the demands wrought by non-studio projects, Disney continued to work on film and television projects. In 1955, he was involved in Man in Space, an episode of the Disneyland series, which was made in collaboration with NASA rocket designer Wernher von Braun. Disney also oversaw aspects of full-length features, Lady and the Tramp, the first animated film in Cinescope in 1955, Sleeping Beauty, the first animated film in Technorama 70mm film, and in 1959, 101 Dalmatians, the first animated feature film to use Xerox cells in 1961, and The Sword and the Stone in 1963. In 1964, Disney produced Mary Poppins, based on the book series by P.L. Travers. He had been trying to acquire the rights to the story since the 1940s. It became the most successful Disney film of the 1960s, although Travers disliked the film intensely and regretted having sold the rights. The same year, he also became involved in plans to expand the California Institute of Arts and had an architect draw up blueprints for a new building. Disney provided 4 exhibits for the 1964 New York World's Fair, for which he obtained funding from selected corporate sponsors. For Pepsi-Cola, he planned a tribute to UNICEF. Disney developed It's a Small World, a boat ride with audio animatronic dolls depicting children of the world. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln contained an animatronic Abraham Lincoln giving excerpts from his speeches. Carousel of Progress promoted the importance of electricity, and Ford's Magic Skyway portrayed the progress of mankind. Elements of all 4 exhibits, principally concept and technology, were reinstalled in Disneyland, although It's a Small World is the ride that most closely resembles the original. During the early to mid-1960s, Disney developed plans for a ski resort in Mineral King, a glacial valley in California's Sierra Nevada. He hired experts such as the Olympic ski coach and ski area designer Willie Schaeffler, with income from Disneyland accounting for an increasing proportion of the studio's income. Disney continued to look for venues for other attractions. In 1963, he presented a project to create a theme park in downtown St. Louis, Missouri. He initially reached an agreement with the Civic Center Redevelopment Corporation, which controlled the land, but the deal later collapsed over funding. In late 1965, he announced plans to develop another theme park to be called Disney World, now Walt Disney World, a few miles southwest of Orlando, Florida. Disney World was to include the Magic Kingdom, a larger and more elaborate version of Disneyland, plus golf courses and resort hotels. The heart of Disney World was to be the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, which he described as an experimental prototype community of tomorrow that will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of the American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. During 1966, Disney cultivated businesses willing to sponsor Epcot. He received a story credit in the 1966 film Lieutenant Robin Crusoe, USN, as Retlo Yensid, his name spelled backwards. He increased his involvement in the studio's films and was heavily involved in the story development of The Jungle Book, live-action musical feature The Happiest Millionaire, both from 1967, and the animated short Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day from 1968. Disney had been a heavy smoker since World War I. He did not use cigarettes with filters and had smoked a pipe as a young man. In early November of 1966, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and was treated with cobalt therapy. Believing the treatment to have been successful, he returned to work. However, on November 30th, he felt unwell and was taken by ambulance from his home to St. Joseph Hospital, where, on December 15th, at the age of 65, he died of circulatory collapse caused by cancer. His remains were cremated 2 days later and his ashes interred at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. The release of The Jungle Book and The Happiest Millionaire in 1967 raised the total number of feature films that Disney had been involved in to 81. When Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day was released in 1968, it earned Disney an Academy Award in the short subject cartoon category, awarded posthumously. After Disney's death, his studio continued to produce live-action films prolifically while the quality of their animated films was allowed to languish. In the late 1980s, this trend was reversed in what the New York Times described as the Disney Renaissance that began with The Little Mermaid from 1989. Disney Studios continued to produce successful film, television, and stage entertainment.